Hello everybody. So today I'm going to do my best to work out what happened with Jeffrey Epstein and how he was able to do what he did, and also try to work out what it was that he did. So we know that he was in trouble for doing things with children, at least people who were under the age of 18, and there's at least Virginia Joffrey, and there are a few other unnamed people. And we know he did it with help from Ghislaine Maxwell, and amongst his clients were probably, although not proven to be, Prince Andrew of England. Now, we don't know who other clients might have been. In fact, there's a lot of stuff we don't know about this. But he had this private island that he bought, where he took people to, and on a private jet that he owned, which was dubbed the Lolita Express. Now, Lolita is quite a famous book that had a man who married a woman who had a daughter who was underage, and he fell in love with the daughter and had sex with the daughter before she was of age. Now, it was, according to the book, it was consensual, but of course we today at least look at that rather disapprovingly, we'll say, and depending on where in the world you are, depends on what the laws are, but it's certainly, that book's been banned in a lot of places because it essentially glorified sex with people who weren't of a legal age. Now, we put that legal age in place, and it does vary depending on the country, what age that is or what the circumstances are. But we put it because we believe that people who are yet to go through puberty are unable to consent. However, somewhere around 97% of people have gone through puberty by the time they're 18. So that's a rather high age to put it at. But the average age for women to go through puberty is around about 13 or 14. So a lot of people say, well, 18's really too high. They should put it at 14. And there are some countries that do put it at 14. Such as France, for example, has the age of consent at 14. And other countries don't have an age limit. And they just simply say, well, you consent or you don't consent, and that's it. And some countries even go further than that and don't even have this as a crime. And sometimes it varies within a country. So, it might be 16, 17, 18. And then where it is allowed, there might be that 2-year age gap. Because men usually go through puberty a bit later than women. And for boys, it's normally more like about 15 or 16. But again, that's an average, and there's quite a range. Girls have been known to go through puberty as young as 7 or 8. That's unusual, but it has been known to happen. And some girls are as late as 16. So by 18, it's pretty much very unlikely for a girl not to have gone through puberty by that stage. So since that's sort of the intent of the law, a lot of people would say, well, 16, 17, even where it is illegal, that really shouldn't be applicable because they've gone through puberty. But because we put an age rather than a stage, that is the law. And you can argue against it as much as you like, but that is the law. And so it's actually quite controversial. We have a case of the French Prime Minister, or French President, I should say, Emmanuel Macron, started a sexual relationship with his school teacher when he was about 13 or 14, and she was about 35. Now, in most countries in the world, that would be illegal. But in France, that's okay. And he married her. She is his first lady. So we do have that range there. Now, where did he get his money from? I want to just say this because he didn't inherit it. He doesn't come from a rich and powerful family. He comes from relative obscurity. Now, I'm not saying his parents were completely broke, but they didn't have the amount of money that could finance this sort of situation. And he was also described as having unlimited wealth. So we're not talking about a fixed amount of net worth. We're not talking about 7 million, 70 million, 700 million, even 7 billion. We're not talking about that. We're talking about essentially he could buy his way out of anything. Of course, that was at the end, and we can imagine, oh, that's the scenario where he blackmailed people and he was so ingrained with all that. Now, we know that that was the case. There's been talks that he was reporting for Mossad, CIA, other intelligence agencies, and he had information on everyone. And I'd say that's probably true. But we don't know exactly the specifics of it. But all of these manipulations do suggest something along those lines. He was probably also involved with organised crime, mafia, that sort of thing. But how do you get started with that sort of thing? Because we know that he went to universities and he dropped out. But then he became a school teacher. And he taught for some 3 or 4 years in a high school before he was caught. And he was a very bad teacher, apparently. He was caught and was fired. Now, the thing is, that's actually a crime. You can go to jail for that, for faking your qualifications. He earned an income that he had no legal right to earn, and he should have had to pay it back. And he didn't have to pay it back. So what happened there, we don't know. But we know that after that, he ended up financing things, but he couldn't have had the money to finance it. Even if you say, okay, so he earned whatever money and he pocketed everything, you know, you're talking about someone that might have had $30,000, $40,000. He wouldn't have had the money to be able to finance anything. So something funny went on there, and we don't know what. I know people say, well, he ended up trafficking women or girls, but I don't think that's what he started with. I'm going to guess, and I've said this previously, I think that he probably started with other sorts of illegal activities. Now, the big one that I think that most powerful people would get into is eating endangered animals. So let's say that he caught something that was illegal. Maybe it was an endangered bird of some kind. Maybe he had it on display, and because that's illegal, but people would be very interested in seeing it. And then perhaps for a certain price, he allowed people to eat it. And that's the thing that people, like most people, would want to do. Certainly if you're in the rich and powerful stage, you know, 90% of people would probably say, yeah, I'd want to see this endangered animal, I'd want to eat it. You know. So I reckon he probably started with that or something like that. I mean, I knew there was a place that used to have koalas, which by law you're not allowed to pat. Well, there's only certain circumstances where you're allowed to, blah, blah, blah. And he just let people just hug them. No one around, no one could see, just let people do it, and that was his big thing. So there's a lot of scope for Jeffrey Epstein to do things that were illegal, but which most people probably thought shouldn't be illegal. And I think that the endangered animals thing is one of them. We also have to note that throughout history, rich and powerful people have done things that were illegal. Even illegal at the time, let alone illegal now. And slavery is one. We know that, I mean, some of the princes and other rich people in Saudi Arabia would pay Hollywood celebrities $1 million to come to visit them and have sex with them for a one-night stand. Now, you might think, well, that's trafficking. That's illegal, but it's not illegal by Saudi Arabian law. So they do it. And, you know, the women consent, the women get $1 million. It's all hush-hush. But, you know, they get people who have been in a movie and they say, all right, we'll contact you, we'll invite you to visit, we'll pay for everything, and we'll pay you $1 million. And they do that. And then they'll kidnap people and turn them into slaves. And they love to do that to people who are fairly well known, who are rich and famous themselves. And it's a thing that they do. And, you know, there's all sorts of things along those lines, not just with women, but also men and boys and all sorts of things. They'll get people to have gladiator fights against animals or against other people. They'll get homeless people, you know, extreme people in extreme poverty who no one's going to miss, and they'll say to them, all right, you two fight to the death, we'll give you some money if you live. or give you luxurious treatment, but then you're going to have to fight against someone else and so forth. And they'll get them to fight against animals, maybe even endangered animals. And you know, there was that meme where they said 100 people versus one silverback gorilla, with a silverback gorilla being also an endangered species. You can bet that these sort of rich and powerful people probably have already done it by this stage. I would say that someone's done it. And if they haven't done it, they're about to do it. And they probably did it before the meme started, let's be realistic. But they would have done different versions of that. And Squid Games, remember, that was based on real life situation, actually in South Korea in the 1950s or 1960s, soon after North Korea broke away. And we also know that in Serbia in the 1990s, there were people who were paying to shoot, to go onto rooftops and shoot and kill random civilians. There's a whole documentary on that. There's quite a lot of evidence. We don't know who they were. We know that people paid to do that. And we know that there's been people who have, throughout history, have paid to hunt people. People they hunt are probably poor people that won't be missed, and they're probably taken to another country and so forth. But, you know, there's all these scenarios, and probably a lot more than that, where rich and powerful people might be interested in it. Now, there are obviously a portion of them who might be interested in doing stuff with children or people who are underage. But I'm going to say that's not the majority. So the majority of people, even with unlimited wealth and unlimited power, simply would not be interested in that. Obviously, Jeffrey Epstein himself was interested. Ghislaine Maxwell, by all reports, was interested, and maybe Prince Andrew was interested, but that doesn't mean that others were interested. So I'm going to guess that he started this up and slowly got more and more risque things, more expensive things. And also, as part of that, he was probably not only getting money, but also if anybody tried to report it, he'd blackmail them. If the blackmail wouldn't work, he'd get somebody else to make their life difficult and maybe even kill them. And it would all be this whole manipulation. And now I'm going to guess, I don't think this is finished. I'm not aware of this ever being exposed in any real fashion. We've only exposed the tip of the iceberg. We know that there were 6 people who were organising it. We only know who 2 of them are. That's Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. The other 4 are unnamed, cannot be named, and cannot be prosecuted because of a sweetheart deal organised by, amongst others, Alan Dershowitz. Now, even if we say that Alan Dershowitz was one of the organisers, I don't know if he was, but even if we say he was, that's still only one. And then there were names like, what was her name? Rena O, who was apparently Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend. She sued Virginia Giuffre for saying that she was a recruiter. And then, I mean, we don't know the outcome of that because Virginia Giuffre died before it was heard. We have Naomi Campbell, who was mentioned. And I mean, there's people that will say, oh, well, you know, Prince Andrew was involved, or Bill Clinton was involved, or Donald Trump involved. I mean, Donald Trump seems to be the silliest one, considering that he stopped all contact with him about 20 years earlier. So, you know, how you're organising when you're not having any contact, unless that was a bluff. But he seems to be probably the least likely, or one of the least likely ones. But yeah, there's certainly, I mean, I'm sure in Saudi Arabia, where such things are more tolerated, we'll say, there would be a lot more scope for people to be involved. And we also have, I shouldn't just say Saudi Arabia, I think most of Africa has very loose laws. And if you're talking about South America, or even Central America, there's a lot of countries there that would allow things to happen a lot more easily than, say, USA would. And even Eastern Europe, Russia. You know, you've got a lot of countries that would be a lot more tolerable. They would be thinking, yeah, this is okay. And when you mix it up with different countries, it becomes even easier. Now, we've only heard about the child and the trafficking part of it. I have no doubt that it was more than that. because you wouldn't get the money just from doing that. Not unless you had it all to start with. I can't imagine that is even the main part of it. I'd say, well, yeah, 5% of it. Look, it might be more than 5%. And I mean, I heard Alan Dershowitz speaking today in an interview on YouTube with someone or other. He was trying to explain, Jeffrey Epstein's not a pedophile because the girls were 16 or 17. And that's an interesting take. You know, and that's a bit of lawyer speak. But yeah, I really don't think that's the point, because the people held against their will and all that sort of stuff and what age they were, it makes some difference, but it doesn't stop being a crime if they were a bit older. Nor does it stop being a crime if it happened in a country where 16 is legal. You know, it's a flimsy excuse, and I've said I think Alan Dershowitz has a lot of blood on his hands in relation to this, but you know, that's the thing. Like a lot of people, they hide their thing with it, and they excuse things, and it all goes this way and that way and so forth. And there's a very good chance that Ghislaine Maxwell will be freed on appeal. She has very good grounds for an appeal on the basis that they already did a deal where she couldn't be prosecuted. And she also has grounds for getting a pardon. I've gone over why I actually think that's a good idea for her to get a pardon, because we'll release more information. And it's such a messy thing. A lot of people want to just wipe their hands of it. But then it's also, if it's half as big as it surely must be, it kind of needs to be exposed. But whether the people who are involved will let it be exposed is another question. Because I think it's really looks like the level of, you know, the old Illuminati sort of level, or one of those secretive organisations where you just cannot get rid of it. You know, maybe you've got the tip of the iceberg there with Jeffrey Epstein's arrest and Ghislaine Maxwell's imprisonment, but we might never get any further than that. Anyway, that's it from me. Bye-bye now.